All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your patience. As Adam said, this is a big crowd, and we're not quite used to this, but it's also awesome at the same time. So thank you for hanging with us, and taking this time, out of your lunch breaks today. So I am Angie Hulseth, your statewide vice president. And I'm going to get us started off and then hand it over to our negotiations team members, some of them co-chairs. But the past week has been an incredibly busy one for contract negotiations. We spent 2 days last week negotiating healthcare with CGIP and the Labor Coalition, and then the next day we met with representatives from Minnesota Management and Budget, or MMB for short. We're going to give you more details on these meetings and other information shortly, and we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. We are using a new format this time, so more people could attend the town hall, and we've asked members to submit questions ahead of time. I can honestly say MAPE has never seen a contract negotiations like this before. MMB's proposals have been incredibly anti-worker and anti-union. Even though there is incredible unrest around the budget, MMB didn't come with ideas to take care of workers. Instead, they played games by bringing contract proposals they knew we wouldn't accept, all to burn time until they could come at us with punishing economic takebacks. MAPE's proposals, on the other hand, are based on the realities our members have been living and dealing with. Telework and the return to office mandate, the state's abuse of overtime, layoffs, and the fact that government workers are continually under attack. Our proposal themes include limiting unilateral actions, telework, worker rights and protections, investment in the workforce, healthcare, and technical proposals. Both MAPE's and the state's proposals are located on our website at mape.org. I'm going to now pass the microphone, so to speak, over to our two negotiations committee co-chairs, and let's give them a little round of applause. See some clapping for Sean McIntyre and Carolyn Murphy. We'll also hear from two negotiators who are part of the union coalition bargaining with the state employee group insurance program, also known as CGIP, and MAPE's own incredible Adam Camp, who is co-chair of the union coalition negotiating with CGIP. He's with us today also. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, hey, Carolyn.
Hey, Ange, thanks so much for stopping by this afternoon. Hey, everyone, it's so great to see so many of you online. MAPE's negotiation committee began working together last year and officially kicked off our negotiations opener with MMB on April 15th. We've been sitting across the table from MMB representatives for about 6 weeks now, and I can tell you it feels much longer than that. State workers are being asked to do more with less through pay cuts proposed at the bargaining table, budget cuts proposed in the legislature, and layoffs proposed by the White House. At the main bargaining table, we continue to fight against proposals that don't benefit workers. We were able to convince MMB to withdraw the proposals that would limit our union's power. But last week, they did not come ready to talk about telework and the RTO order, despite the approaching June 1st deadline. It felt beyond disrespectful. All of your negotiation reps are fighting for flexible work, affordable health care, and livable wages. This fight will take every single one of us. Every action we take from here on out is meaningful, and we'll hear more about those actions in a few minutes. Since there is still no state budget, we have not yet begun discussing across-the-board wage increases. The legislature must first agree on a budget, and the governor must sign it. Wages most likely will have to wait until push week. Now I'm going to hand it over to negotiations co-chair Sean McIntyre to talk about healthcare. Sean?
Thanks, Carolyn. So a lot has been happening with healthcare bargaining. Not much of it has been good, if we're being honest. If CGIP has its way with the proposals as they gave them to us, MAPE members and their families would see premium costs go up over 200% by January. And out-of-pocket costs would increase by 2/3 of where they are at right now. These larger concessions are more than we have seen in many years, and we've met 5 times with Seagate so far. We rejected all of those proposals every single time, and they didn't change one bit during the entire process. They keep coming back with the same language, the same numbers. There's a clear statement of their intent, and they are coming after our benefits, that those costs are going to go up if we accept them as they are. We are not. We're fighting them. We're going to fight them together the way we always do, the way we know how to, and that's to band together, let MMB know we're ready to fight, and fight like we have always in the past, which is together and with solidarity. We are the ones that we want to remind everyone that we are the ones who keep the state running, and in return are offered outrageously high healthcare cost increases. Much of this is due to the repeated budget mistakes by Seagate. Part of that was pretty evident as we sat down with them, just multiple mistakes in their numbers and coming to the table with, this is not what we planned for. We didn't see these coming. That's their job, is to make sure that they budget these things the way we ask them to. It's not fair to budget the budget. It's not fair to balance the budget on the backs of state workers and our families. The backs of people who provide critical services to millions of Minnesotans who need them every day. That's not what we're here for, and that's not what we're going to accept as a team. Last week, we did complete coalition bargaining. So that's where we sit down with all the other public sector unions and negotiate for our healthcare stuff. We did make some improvements to some of the life insurance and dental benefits. You guys will hear more about that as they come out. They sit ready to sign as a tentative agreement before we actually close them out with bigger picture stuff. That in mind, there has been no movement on the big ticket healthcare issues like premium cost and cost sharing. So those will go to the main table for what we call push week at the end of June, for the overall contract. The good news here is that all the other unions, the public sector unions that we've met with in that room, have vowed to stand in coalition with us and fight against this stuff. These takebacks are something that are going to affect everyone, and they're all in league with us, and they want to make sure that they are fighting right alongside us. That being said, we are planning a joint coalition. That joint coalition is planning a solidarity rally for the first day of Push Week, which is tentatively scheduled for the 23rd of June. Stay tuned for more info on that. And if you guys can, we encourage you, please show up. This is going to be a litmus test for whether or not people do show up and show MMB that we are serious about fighting for our healthcare contracts and benefits. So again, stay tuned for more info there on how you can get involved. I'm now going to hand over the screen to my fellow MAPE negotiator, Kirsten Peterson. She'll explain how the state's healthcare system works and what's unique about it. Hey, Kristen.
Thanks, Sean. By day, I am the Senior Healthcare Program Investigator at the Minnesota Department of Health. I investigate consumer complaints against their health insurance companies, and I do a handful of other regulatory health insurance stuff. I am also an at-large MAPE negotiator. I want to begin with a quick summary on how our health insurance works. I know there are probably folks at this town hall who are also in the health insurance regulation world and who already know this information, but I do know there's also a lot of people here today who don't know how our CGIP health insurance works. This is not intended to teach you everything about the plan, just enough in a few minutes to make sure you understand what we can bargain over and what the stakes of this fight are. We have what is called a self-insured health plan. Many people who have worked in the private sector are probably more familiar with the fully insured plans that are offered there. Those fully insured plans are structured differently than ours. They have the health insurance company absorb the risk of a sudden increase in healthcare expenses. In those situations, you and your employer pay premium to the insurance company, and the insurance company designs a plan that exposes the insurance to the least amount of risk so they can face, right? This is not the situation in our self-insured health plan. The money that we pay every month in premiums and the money that our employer pays on our behalf goes into a big bucket that we pay a small fee to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Health Partners, and CVS. We assume the risk of big healthcare cost swings with this plan type, but we also have much more control over the design of the plan. This is why we've been able to do things like offer zero cost mental health help and rates. Under either the self-funded or the fully funded model, the employer is theoretically bearing the entire cost of healthcare because these are both employer-funded plans. However, that's not what happens in practice. Employers have two primary ways of shifting costs onto the employee. First, through premium contributions, and second, through cost sharing in the plan design. With cost sharing changes, the plan design dictates how much of your health insurance costs you pay across the top. Things like deductibles, out-of-pocket maximums, copays, and coinsurance, which I won't define here for time's sake, are all included in the calculation called actuarial value. That's loosely defined as the percentage of total claims to a healthcare plan that are paid by premiums as opposed to by the member at the plan of service. So if all the people that are covered by CGIP have $1 billion of healthcare costs, and the actual number is closer to 1.2 billion, but if we have $1 billion in healthcare costs, however, members pay $100 million of that in deductibles, co-pays, insurance, etc. That is 10% of the overall cost of care, and the insurance pays the rest. That's an actuarial value of 90%. So for the record, that is the equivalent of a platinum plan under the Affordable Care Act. For the rest of the money that has to get paid, the state has to collect that in premiums. Like almost all employers, the state has us bear some of the cost, but it's fairly small. 95% of the cost is borne by the agencies for single employee plans, and 85% of the cost is borne by the agency for spouses and children. So we go back to that example of $1 billion in healthcare costs. If we are covering the first 100 million, there is 900 million left to be paid by premiums. Of that, the state pays around 90% or 810 million, while we contribute $90 million in premiums. So here's the actual breakdown. You can see on the slide here, it works out that between both kinds of cost sharing, what we share in premiums and what we share in deductibles, co-pays, insurance, we end up paying about 19% of the total cost of care. That's the blue and red that you see on the screen there. If you're sharp at math, you will also notice that the numbers don't add up. They wouldn't have added up anyway, because this doesn't include various fees that make the disparity even worse. Also worth noting that CGIP did not take in remotely enough premiums last year, and they fell short by $78 billion. The next two slides here are slides that we got from CGIP. We have included their excuses on the left. As expected, healthcare costs are continuing to rise nationwide. That's not a surprise, I think, probably to any of us. Yet, our employer vastly underestimated how much healthcare costs would rise and how quickly our budget surplus would disappear. If nothing changes, that is, if the plan design and premium share stay the same, over the next year, we would expect to see a total premium increase of 27%. 2 years, we'd expect to see a total premium increase of 27%. We can't negotiate that. It's built into the nature of a self-funded plan. We have to account for the growing cost of healthcare, right? But remember, the agencies are on the hook for 90% of that cost, which is around $290 million. So as you can expect, especially with the statewide budget where it is, management wants to take that money to make up the difference out of our pockets. So here is the first proposal from our employer. They want to change the deductibles, out-of-pocket maximums, and copays pretty substantially. The reason that their projected premium numbers goes from 16% next year down to 10% next year with this proposal is because that additional money is going to come right out of our pockets through increased deductibles, copays, and other cost sharing increases. Side note, they had originally told us a smaller number than 10% with their proposed changes, but when we pointed out that their math didn't add up, they went back to their numbers and were forced to admit they had budgeted wrong again. So now instead of taking it out of our healthcare, we fully expect them to try to take it out of our wages later. Sounds fair, right? We posted a summary on the website of the most egregious changes, so I won't go into details here, but from what we've heard, we're especially concerned with the new deductible on prescriptions and the overall changes to deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. So here's another slide from CGIP again. These are provided by the employer. There are two important facts here. The first is that our current actuarial value is about 93%, which means that our employer is bearing around 93% cost of working. The reason that this number grows over time is because numbers like deductibles stay constant while healthcare costs grow nationwide. As you can see, we have modified the plan over the years to keep the plan hovering between a 92 and a 93% actuarial value. In other words, if we were to go back to the last slide, they want to drop that all the way down to 90%. So they want to pay that much less in things. That $78 million figure we mentioned earlier, that is $78 million that would come out of our pockets. It's about a 50% increase in cost sharing. Even though our premium increases would be lower than projected, the total costs would be much, much higher. So here's the cut. Management simply wants us to pay more in premiums, a lot more, so that they have to pay less. They want us members to pay $110 million for their health insurance for no other reason than that the legislature can't budget and the consultants can't forecast. This proposal is nothing more than using an induced crisis to justify a major concession. Instead of a 27% increase, our members would see over a 200% increase by 2027 for single enrollees and a 65% increase for families. Rather than tightening their belts and rummaging through the couch cushions to find money to cover those healthcare expenses, our employer is proposing to nearly double the costs of healthcare for all state employees under the guise of saving agencies. For many in our union, these new costs would effectively erode all of the wage progress that was made in 2023. For others, these proposals would mean delaying necessary care to save up money or sacrificing meals to cover premiums. The good news is, this is our employer's opening offer. We have the opportunity and we have the power to fight back. I have seen more members turn up to town halls than I ever have in all of my years of public service and union leadership, and I'm including the COVID response town halls. Our healthcare coalition of unions is more united than it ever has been. Every union that's represented in the coalition knows these costs are untenable and our employer isn't providing data that makes sense. Our unity is our strength, and there are a number of things we can do to draw attention to these issues, including organizing and fighting back. We collected many questions in advance and we'll be answering as many as we have time for at the end. I know this information is very complex. This recording will be posted on the website later today if you need to review the information again. There were also resources in the email that went out yesterday. Otherwise, please reach out to your negotiations representative with questions. Next up is fellow CGIP negotiator, Gabe Perkins. He is the Region 20 negotiations representative. Hey, Gabe.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. I am not Sean McIntyre. I'm a much better looking version of Gabe Perkins. For some reason, my camera wasn't working. You know, it's been a really challenging year, I must have to say. One of my biggest concerns about our CGIP negotiations has been trust and transparency all along. I guess my concern is how can you negotiate in good faith when every set of numbers they give us is wrong? The state is blaming workers for their poor fiscal management, and they are spending down those reserves. They're using a consultant who keeps making mistakes. Recently, when MAPE's Adam Camp questioned some more of their numbers, they were forced to admit another mistake they made. A $70 million one. And who do they expect to pay the latest for this latest mistake? You and I. They continue to balance the budget off the backs of workers. If I made that big of a financial mistake, a $70 million mistake, I wouldn't have a job. So these healthcare increases will deeply impact our members and our families. What would a 65% increase to family premiums do, or over $3,000 a year do for you and your family budget? How would that change your life? For overall, you know, management can take those hits. They make 6 digits a year. But for you and I, those cuts are they really hit our pocketbooks really, really hard. For overall bargaining, they keep bringing up things they know we won't accept, and they don't respect our answers. It boils down to trust and transparency. The good news is we have to fight back. We have to go all gas and no brake right now. And like all medical procedures, we have to apply pressure to the wound and stop the bleed. We don't have to accept this, my fellow Mapers. What we have to do is fight and fight back and fight hard. We take caring for Minnesotans seriously and consider it more than a job. None of us want to strike. I repeat, we don't want to do a strike, but if MMB pushes us to do us, we must be prepared. There are some things we can do to make sure we are prepared. If you go to MAPE.org and click on the first slider, that will give you take you to the Get Involved page, and that's where we are keeping up to date on actions and things you can do. Please check that page and check it often. On that page, you will find all the ways you can get involved and steps to be prepared, such as making sure you log into the MAPE portal and update your contact information. Make sure you join your local contract action team. Attend a strike training session. Some of them are going on today. And then participate in events hosted by your locals. Two big actions I'd like to draw your attention to today. Informational pickets are going on June 3rd and 4th, happening across the state. Look for information from your region and come to all MAPE pickets at the Department of Corrections in St. Paul. If you don't like this healthcare proposal, then take action and go to both your local and one at the Department of Corrections. We also have a photo action where you can tell us these healthcare increases and how they will impact you. At MAPE.org/get involved, there is a template you can print and take a picture holding a sign and send it to the MAPE Dropbox. Or feel free to make your own sign. Details about this action are in the email you received today, reminding you about the town hall for today. It will be in the newsletter sent later today. I'm now going to pass it back to Sean.
All right, thanks, Dave. Okay. Now we're going to tackle some of your guys' questions from the Q&A. If I can find where I had some of them down. Okay. So before we start tackling some of them, I did want to just go over a couple of notes. We did not respond to anything that was just a comment, but trust us, we do have them, and we'll consider all the comments. We're just going to try to answer things that were presented as questions at this time. We also received a lot of questions that seem to be directed at either MMB or at Governor Walz and not us. The answer to most of those questions is that we agree. We would love to see some of those answers ourselves, but we can't answer for them and we can only answer for ourselves. So we're going to stick to things that we can answer. We won't be responding to any agency specific questions, and we would ask you to redirect those to your steward, your meet and confer team, or your business agent. We recognize that some of those in this room who are presenting are those people for you, but right now we're going to focus on the bargaining stuff statewide. We did receive a bunch of questions regarding changes we could make to the healthcare plan. There were some really good ideas in there, including some that we did have at the table. But the primary healthcare bargaining is now complete, and we will now only be taking the big issues of cost sharing and premium split to the main table. So we won't be addressing those issues here either. With that, I'm going to kick off just answering some of the questions that we've got so far. First one being, there are many subjects being negotiated. What are the top negotiating priorities for MAPE leadership right now? So as you guys know, some of our biggest budgets, some of our biggest issues include across the board wage increases, healthcare cutbacks, stopping MMB's unilateral power for issues like return to office or RTO, and fixing abuses like the overtime exempt increases and all the OT. What am I trying to say out here? That was
Abuses, I think.
okay. Overtime abuses. Thank you. We don't want to get too detailed to tip our hand as far as what is priority and what is not, more than anything, just because we don't want MMB to really know what our playbook is. And we don't want to let them know, like, yeah, what we're coming with. We have sent out a number of surveys asking what members will strike for. So we do have that data. We don't we have had some people asking what the results of that data is and those surveys are. We don't release that either for the same reason. If management were to get their hands on that data, then they would have a pretty big advantage in knowing what our members would strike for and where our power lies. In the end, we are committed to fighting fights that provide the greatest amount of benefit and that honestly are winnable. We won't urge everyone to vote for a strike for an issue that we can't win on the streets. And overall, we just want to make everyone aware that the thing we're dedicated to the most is your guys' welfare. and just keeping jobs and preserving jobs as much as we can. So with that, I will pass it on to Carolyn for the next question.
All right, so I've got, what proposals have there been movement on? Given the current budget, will there be any room for a COLA or cost of living adjustment? So, management has shown, interest in seriously addressing some of our concerns around telework, AI, and overtime, but they still really have a long way to go. There's no question that these are hard times we're negotiating in. It's entirely possible that wages, that increases to wages may lead to layoffs if there isn't enough money in the budget. So through all this, we just want to make sure we don't go backwards and that we don't accept concessions or take backs based on bad budgeting.
Awesome. Okay, the next question that we had was, if the session is not closed and we don't know how much money there will be in the budget, can we pause negotiations and let what plays out inform our negotiations going forward? To answer that, neither party wants to negotiate these issues until there is a budget and we actually know what the money looks like. That's not fair to either side, really. If it looks like we won't know the full numbers, we will delay push week. We are hopeful that won't be necessary. I think most people, if you're following the news, see that a special session is in the works. Hopefully they actually start doing that. We will see. If you know your local representative, you might want to urge them to get back to work. I'll pass the next one on to KP.
Right, the next one is, what happens with our health insurance in the event of a strike? Does insurance essentially turn off during the strike period, meaning that it incurs out of pocket? So the way that our insurance works, regardless of a strike or not, is that if you're no longer employed with the state, as long as you are employed on the first of the month, you would have health insurance for the rest of the month. Which is why in the event of a strike, heaven forbid, we would time it accordingly to make sure folks get as much healthcare as possible. And then if it does go on for longer than a month, again, heaven forbid, COBRA would come into effect.
Another question, are the mental health benefits, no co-pays for mental health office visits, we currently have staying as part of the new healthcare agreement? Yes, and with some good news, we've reduced the co-pays for tiers 3 and 4, so there's some good news there. Also on another note, another question, and we've heard this from many members, I took this job for the better insurance, so I am worried. Do you feel that there will be movement on the premium and deductible proposed? It depends on how hard we push, and a lot of it depends on all of you joining us today, what you're willing to do to make that push very, very hard. So we have to stand together on this. As a negotiator, I feel confident we will get them to move. The big question is how much? And this is where solidarity matters, folks. So get out there and do what you can, but it's all on us to push and push hard. Like I said earlier, all gas, no brake. All gas, no brake.
All right, the next question here is, can we negotiate for the right to telework 100%? So our proposals would largely put the decision of whether to telework and how much in the employee's hands. For some, that actually might mean 100% telework. So while the RTO policy is set to start on Monday, we'll continue to push to get these issues fixed in the future. I have another question here. It says, I'm confused. Should we or should we not sign the new telework agreements that are coming later this week? I've heard it both ways. So we are asking people to sign the telework agreement, but also feel free to appeal the agreement and see if you can get some changes, or even just remind your management what a terrible policy this is. John?
Okay, so one of the questions that we've gotten from several folks is kind of concerning like politicians and the politics and how MAPE is involved there. So some politicians that MAPE supported in the past have now embraced what appear to be anti-worker policies. Walls being the prime example. So our own governor, for instance, with the RTO callback, does MAPE intend to make clear to those politicians that it will withdraw its endorsement and funding from candidates that continue to support anti-worker policies? with Walls, I do want to point out that with Walls as governor, we did get a historic raise in our last contract, and he has typically been labor friendly in the past. That being said, I think if he thinks that his legislator and MMB's mismanagement of our budget is going to be borne on the back of the state workers, I think he should be prepared to lose a few more friends as he continues to push this. So again, something that obviously we're paying attention to and MAPE is interested in. I think this is a larger conversation that's going to play out over time as well. But his actions lately have definitely impacted our relationship, and I think we're going to play ball moving forward as we need to. But with that, we do have to remember that we do have political allies, and making sure that we have a seat at the table with them is important as well. I think the next one is Carol.
Yeah, so I have another question here for telework. If we win the telework protections that are included in our proposals, will that really override the governor's policy? What is to stop him from just issuing another policy that then counters the new protections? So a change in our contract cannot be overridden by the governor outside of an emergency.
Next one is healthcare again. So the question is, I am wondering if unmarried partners that you cohabitate with can be added to insurance policies. This is one that I heard a lot before we started negotiations as we were going around to all the different regions and locals. So it was one of our proposals within the healthcare coalition. As it turns out, this would not be tax advantaged under IRS regulations, which means that if you were to have a domestic partner on your health insurance plan, you would be assessed about $10,000 in imputed income that you would have to pay taxes on. So it's money that you're not seeing in your pocket that you have to pay taxes on top of it. And of course, as with many things that are hard, MMB did not want to deal with that. However, I'm really excited we did secure an agreement to meet and negotiate over domestic partners in our health insurance. If heaven forbid Obergefell should ever be overturned or something should happen in DC and gay marriage is no longer the law of the land. So we have an agreement with MMB that we will negotiate with them to add domestic partners back in, should the legal landscape change in the world.
All right, next question is, will BAPE be pursuing the option to add 40 hours of compensation annually into an employee's deferred compensation, which would be similar to other union contract rights? And the good news is that still remains on the table. Most likely, since we don't have a budget right now, the legislature, we won't probably discuss it until push week due to economics. And so we're hoping we'll have that conversation soon.
Well, so I've got the next question here. Why are you calculating COLA based on CPI year over year? If the CPI is less next year than it is this year in May, doesn't that mean we don't get anything next year at all? I calculate we get 1.43% this year, which is terrible. That is a great question. So our auto COLA proposal includes that number as the floor and not the ceiling. And we can still negotiate for additional raises on top of that.
Next question was from our negotiations update email from the 20th of this month. There's a reference to ending overtime abuse. What is that about? So two parts. Primarily, it's about the employer not letting non-exempt employees higher than a 7L get any overtime when they are sick. And then the employer overworking exempt employees by ignoring the 80-hour pay period dictated there and not letting people balance their time. So that's the twofold answer to that question. Yeah. Next one for Gabe.
For the proposal related to counting the Connect 700 probationary period as part of the probationary period for the purpose of seniority, what is the status on that? Has MMB been receptive to that proposal? Also, is the proposal slated to be retroactive? Will employees who completed the C700 period already have our months of service seniority recalculated, or will it only be for new members? Unfortunately, MAPE has not been receptive to this proposal. We continue to fight for it, and we will fight hard for it. because it does not cost them a penny, folks. And it's cruel and it's mean. Our proposal would be retroactive. Management is trying to make it less so.
All right, I have the next question here. What are the proposals regarding artificial intelligence, AI safety, and ending overtime abuse? Is that 2 or 3 topics? For example, artificial intelligence, safety, and ending overtime abuse? I'm most interested in the AI related proposals. So those are 2 separate proposals. We really want to make sure that we have protections around HR decisions being made by AI, as well as the opportunity to talk about and negotiate how new systems are being implemented here at the state.
All right, is it possible to add niece, nephew to bereavement and sick leave contract language? My supervisor was flexible with me, but I noticed that niece wasn't covered by our contract. I was a complete wreck after she died. It was very difficult to work, and it just didn't seem right that the death of my sibling as a child was not covered in her contract, but yet every other relationship is. Unfortunately, sorry to hear about that. The good news is the new sick and safe leave law will allow you to take your sick leave, including your bereavement, for blood relation who is equivalent of a close family member, or 1 person per year who is designated as someone to support. So we are focusing on this in bargaining. So there's some good movement in that area.
Okay, the next question is about, if there were a strike, would I be able to work a temporary job as a contractor? Are there any prohibitions related to temporary work during strikes? The answer is you definitely can work during a strike. So you can, if you want to go deliver pizzas or you know, whatever little side gig you can to make ends meet, you can do that. The thing where you want to be careful is if you work as a revenue employee, working as a tax preparer would probably be a conflict of interest. Those are the kinds of things you would want to avoid. But as far as making ends meet and just doing some side gig work, absolutely feel free. There's nothing that says you can't do that. Next question. I'm not sure if I did see anything in regards to employees who are at the top of their pay grid for negotiations. I think historically there's been a good portion or so of employees that are at the top of the grid. Are there any negotiations regarding adding steps? This is a perennial one. We get that this comes to the table, I think, every contract cycle. I know a lot of folks, when they top out, they feel stuck and that there's not much being done there for them. We obviously heard that again this time. And in terms of just ranking those out as a team as to what was going to be brought to the table, that ultimately lost out as far as getting brought to the main table. It just doesn't represent everyone. And right now, I think I'm protecting jobs in general. So that did not make it to the big table this time. Next question, KP.
Thank you. So really quick before I dive into the next question, I'm getting like a ton of messages about the quality of the stream. Very sorry, but I promise we take this show on the road too and come to your regions. So you'll get this same information in your regions as well. So anyway, the question that we have in front of us is healthcare costs. So the question is, have the unions or CGIP ever thought of setting other coverage levels like employee +1 or spouse and employee and children, like separating it out? This is a question we've asked in the past. It's one that we did entertain with the Union Coalition. However, the coalition ultimately decided not to pursue it because we figured out throughout the cost analysis that carving out those lower levels of coverage would make family coverage more expensive to the point that it might be unaffordable for our lower paid siblings here in MAPE and in other unions. I know that this is something that folks want, but if you remember, I talked before about the big bucket of money that our premiums pay. We have to make up that money somewhere, and it would come out of the family. It's guys. Thank you. In the end, we did not bring this proposal at employee +1 because it would be divisive in a season where we need solidarity. The next question is healthcare as well. Is where are we in getting better dental coverage? Good overall health starts in the mouth, and having only $1,000 a year doesn't cover a simple crown. So if you're the person who asks this question, you should reach out to me because the maximum that we have is $2,200, and very few people end up hitting their maximum in the end. So we are bringing some orthodontia maximum increases to the main table, but in general, we decided, given how few people hit the max spend every year, we were better off using that money to fight the medical takebacks.
All right, with the RTO mandate, where's the money coming from to support workers back in the office? The cost for desks, monitors, heating, cooling, infrastructure. Also for locations that directly serve patients, where is the security support for extra people on and inpatient work areas coming from? That comes right out of your agency's budget, folks. This is why we think it is totally absurd to be proposing this during a huge budget crisis. One other question came in, a very important one, regarding healthcare, and that how does it affect retirees? And I guess my best advice from what I know is, will you be able to afford to retire with the current health care costs that we have right now? The other aspect is, you can buy the state health insurance plan when you retire, but you're going to be paying probably a lot more of that. So, I mean, we don't know what those final rates are or anything. But this could impact, I know several of my colleagues could impact some of their retirement plans. And so I would encourage you to call CGIP and inquire more about what those rates actually will be. I think on that note, we're just gonna turn it over to Angie and she'll bring in the conclusion.
Hey, thank you, Gabe, Kirsten, Sean, and Carolyn for taking those questions and for all the work you're doing for us in terms of our negotiation activities. I know it's a lot of work. I watch mostly from the background, but we really, truly all appreciate the work that you do. So one thing I wanted to mention quickly is a shout out to Region 19. Speaker Dunaway and I are here, and they're in the other room watching this presentation. We are traveling down here this week to specifically talk to people. So in terms of comments, that I'm sorry and we apologize if the streaming is not good, but I know that several of us are fully willing to come to your locals and regions and talk to you in person, which is what we're doing in 19 today. June 10th will be in Region 14, so we're looking forward to that. But we're nearly out of time. So before we leave, I want to thank you all again for attending and sending us the questions. We are in the midst of challenging times. State workers are being asked to do more with less through pay cuts, budget cuts, and layoffs. Millions of Minnesotans may not receive the critical services they need because the state doesn't want to pay its workers fairly. We don't want to strike, but we take our jobs of caring for Minnesotans seriously. In MAPE's 45-year history, we have only gone on strike once, nearly a quarter century ago, and I was there, 2001, and it was over the state wanting to gouge us on healthcare. We hope they will not continue down this path in 2025. We are bargaining in good faith for livable wages and affordable healthcare. Do not balance the budget on hardworking public servants. But we must be prepared to act if the state chooses to treat its workers disrespectfully and unfairly. Please go to MAPE's portal and make sure we have your correct contact information outside of the office. Join your contract action team. Attend a strike education session. Participate in actions organized by your local. I have never seen such unity among MAPE members. We are united. We will do what we need to do to get a fair contract. When we organize and work together, we are unstoppable. When we fight, we win. Thanks again for participating in your contract negotiations. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Hey everyone, last thing, we've obviously talked about info picket signups. If you are interested and we need you to do this, we're showing management and we're also showing ourselves, like how much strength do we have. June 4th is the last day of bargaining and we're holding before push week and we're holding pickets in a number of sites. You can check with your local. We're going to have more of these pickets be signing up. There will also be picketing at the Department of Corrections that day for people who do not have a local in your region, but check your own regional picket first. But everyone, please sign up, scan this. You should be able to scan that right from your computer. And we'll leave this up just for a minute so everybody's got it. But thank you so much for coming. I don't know if anybody else wanted to take people out.
Thanks for showing up, everybody. Please show up in person to these picket events. That's going to show us how much power we actually have at the table.
I think it's probably worth noting too that these mega corporations like Zoom and YouTube clearly don't want to make it easy for unions to organize. And I can't imagine why. Anyway, thank you for your patience.
Thanks, everyone.